Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to coverage of the Wimbledon of Chess, the Tata Steel chess tournament, which happens every January and has been going on for some 80 years. In today's video, I'm going to recap rounds 7 and 8 of the 2025 edition, and we will have to start having a reasonable discussion about whether or not Gukesh will be the successor to the dominance that was displayed for so many years by Magnus Carlsen. Gukesh is the current world champion, and he's young, and he is already showing very strong signs of maturity, emotional stability, and the most important thing for a champion, consistency. He is so consistent. And in today's video, I will show you exactly what I mean. I'm also going to show you a few other of the games from the Masters section and the Challengers section, and I will also give you an update on the standings. And also, I said this in the last video that I made, friendly reminder, European Tour 2025 in these 6 cities. Link is in the description. Tickets are going fast. And obviously, I've received a lot of comments like, why are you not coming to where I live and so on. It's the first tour. And if it's a good one, and if we have a great time, we will add more cities for a second edition. Also, I'm hosting a small event in Hamburg. Link in the description to that as well. There are about 10 to 15 tickets left. That one is in a week, February 4th, 2025. And that's going to test the live tour concept in Hamburg, Germany. I'm very excited. We've got the big Greek joining, who is a strong player and a chess content creator. And I'm hearing Jan Gustafsson might be there. So, yeah, that'll be fun. And if you don't know who Jan Gustafsson is, well, you're missing out. Folks, it is time to talk about young man, but wise beyond his years already, Mr. Gukesh. This is a game that he played against Pintala Harikrishna, and I actually think it was announced some time ago. Harikrishna worked with Gukesh for the World Championship. So it's kind of hard to play somebody who knows you quite well. Gukesh plays e4, and something funny happens here. Harikrishna plays the French. Now, you may remember that Ding Liren in the World Championship match played the French defense quite a lot against Gukesh. And Gukesh, in those matches, you know, he would kind of consistently go for the knight c3 setups. One time he went for the exchange variation. One thing he did not go for was the advanced variation with e5. In general, it is very principled to develop your pawn and then push it in the center because it takes space away from black, and it's not easy to develop the pieces. It's also considered the best option by far, according to the computer, to play the advanced variation against the Caro-Kann defense. Now, in the Caro-Kann defense, the bishop can still come out, but the trade-off is that the pawn already moved once, so moving it a second time would be a waste of time. Whereas in the French defense, the pawn goes to c5 straight away, which obviously makes a lot of sense, but the bishop is blocked. So you take the good with the bad, you know? In the French and the Caro-Kann, both come with their pluses and minuses. c3 is the move chosen by Gukesh, knight c6, knight f3, and now here, black has to make the decision. Black can play the classical main line, which is queen b6. I do think it's the most popular move in the position. There is also bishop d7 and rook c8. That's kind of like the line where you just develop and get some queenside play. There are also some variations. You can immediately put this knight on f5. You have to waste a couple of moves because you can't go knight f6. But in general, the pressure is on these pawns, and black has one pawn break and then a second pawn break. So, you know, black is trying to sometimes make the f6 pawn push and sometimes play c5 and put pressure on the queen side. So in this game, Harikrishna does play bishop d7. We have bishop e2 and knight e7. This is the line that Harikrishna is choosing. Again, here, this is like a very, very common line. Now Gukesh castles, and we have pawn takes, and knight f5. This is a very, very, very common position. White has waited to move this knight, so now he obviously plays knight c3, and now black sort of chooses. Is he going to play rook c8? Is he going to play a6? Is he going to play bishop e7? Harikrishna plays a6. That move has two purposes. Number one, taking the b5 score away. Number two, potentially playing b5 himself in the future. Now we have king h1. And after a couple of more moves, we're going to end up in a position where theory no longer exists, right? So here, there have been many, many moves. And rook b1 is a really mysterious move. You know, you would think you can play a3. The problem with a3 is that sometimes the b3 square is weakened and black can sort of rush to get there. That's why rook b1, a very mysterious move. Like, if you leave a strong player in this position without any pre-existing knowledge, they will almost never play rook b1. Like, of course, a3 makes way more sense because b4 is going to come, and at least it's protected by a pawn. But rook b1 is played. Now Hare Krishna reacts to the potential b4 move, and he plays this very enterprising and interesting idea, targeting the pawn on the d4 square. Obviously, white should play bishop e3 now, and the point of bishop e3 is you're happy to give up the bishop because you bolster your center very nicely, and then you open up the rook. Every time a pawn moves in chess, or frankly any piece, you should see what that does, but also how it affects the other pieces. Except after queen b6, Gukesh goes g4. Oh. Whoa. He's like, yo, Hare Krishna, Pintala, sir, if you'd like to take this pawn, please be my guest. And by the way, that is why the king went to h1. You see, in a lot of these advanced French positions, white has a big space advantage and really wants to go use the other pawns, but the king needs to be moved away. And that is why king h1 is almost always the right move. All right, it's almost always a good move. And now, if black were to take on d4, there would be bishop e3, and there is a pin, and the knight cannot take with a check. You see how deep this concept is? The whole reason you play king h1 is because your knight now no longer hits the king, right? There's no hit on the king. And obviously, if bishop c5, there is knight a4, removing the defender, and then simply winning the knight in the center. Now, the best move here, according to the computer, is kind of insane. It's to take the pawn, but with the other knight. Because bishop e3, there is knight takes, and if pawn takes f5, black plays knight f3, and if bishop f3, it looks for a moment like black is simply down a piece, but black has rook c3! And you cannot take, because, well, I guess you can take, but, so the best move here for white is actually to play fe, fe, knight d5, pawn takes d5, and bishop takes f3, and this position is equal, but only if black advances. Which is a hard move to calculate because you really just feel like everything is hanging by a thread here. But that was the right sequence. Knight c takes d4 was required here. But Hare Krishna leaves the center. And this is a major shift in this game. After queen b6, he kind of believes Gukesh here, right? You sort of, and that is what makes a world champion. He has aura. He has aura. He actually forces opponents to sometimes make inaccuracies. Knight c takes d4 was the correct approach, but Hare Krishna retreats. And now the next like 8 moves are just improvements for white. So first he goes here, obviously, improving move. Hare Krishna's point of retreating is that now he will strike at this pawn and try to regain the footing. Now it's a game of timing. Right now, black wants a few more moves, and he wants to consolidate. Gukesh is like, be my guest. Now, it's really bad when your opponents let you do exactly what you want, because they might have something up their sleeve you have not seen, and Gukesh plays g6. And that is a nice idea. That is an offering. Look at that. Walks the pawn right into black's territory. This is called a clearance sacrifice. First of all, you are clearing for the g5 square, which will be utilized. Second of all, you're just creating a target. It's just a positional sacrifice. You allow the pawn to be taken, and you ruin black's pawn structure. Hare Krishna decides he doesn't want the pawn. But now, this trade leads to a couple of things. Number one, this pawn is 2 squares from queening, which could be a problem. Also, this is weak, right? Which could be a problem. So what does Gukesh do now? Just an improving move. Bishop d3. Black's position is dangerously positioned here. The knight retreats to e7. Nice, defending and targeting the pawn on g6. The rook protects. The bishop blocks. Now knight a4. While black is stretched thin over here defending, the knight is trying to infiltrate on c5. And b4 will anchor that knight to the c5 square. Computer wasn't thrilled about knight a4. It wanted Gukesh first to play bishop f4 and then go knight e2, which is complicated. I don't really get it, but it kind of wanted him to do it this way. He does it this way because this looks way more normal. b6 and now b5. So Gukesh is trying to break the walls down on 2 sides. He's trying to play b4, b5, g4, g5. He does end up breaking the wall down on the queen side, But Hare Krishna doesn't have a bad position. Rook c6, he's kind of stable, but he is really defending. Queen b3, and Hare Krishna's like, take my pawn. I don't want it. I don't want that pawn. I mean, I simply cannot defend myself, right? Black is still okay, but he is a pawn down. Rook, and now the knight comes out from b6 to sort of reposition potentially to go to the c5 square. Rook to c5, very nice idea. Take, take, and now knight takes e3, but it's Gukesh. It is Gukesh who is arriving on b7 with a fatal threat on the h7 square. Actually, after knight a4 and knight f5 and rook c5, Black is seemingly okay after just a simple move like rook c8, which is kind of hard to believe. Because again, you still look like these ideas exist, but queen c7 and Black seals the entire position shut. Look at that. The queen sandwich between the rooks. Yeah, that's a nice one. Rook c5 takes, but now Gukesh is winning. Rook e1. Looks like Black is still okay, but the position is absolutely falling apart. Queen f7 check, knight g7, and this. And you needed all of those resources because your king was weak, but will survive the attack. And now it's just a matter of removing the defenders. Rook c5, king f1, Gukesh, cold-blooded, walks the king out to g3, walks the king out to f4, and as a bonus, king to g5. Now, why not? Maybe even to h6. And that is the sign of a champion. Gukesh has now drawn all his games and won 3. So, not all his games, but he's on what we call +3. He has 3 wins, no losses. He's number 4 in the world in rating. And he's looking good, man. He is looking really good. He is outplaying people. When his positions are not good, he's defending them. We very well could be heading in a direction of Gukesh and, and Magnus, Gukesh rather, being that next generation and being a consistent champion. But we will see. And we haven't had an opportunity to see them play against each other all that much. They will in freestyle chess, but I don't know if they will in, classical anytime soon, which is kind of a shame. Now, I have a great game for you from the challenger section. Both of these players, actually, I think Divya was having a very strong event, but she hit a bit of a losing streak. But Miao Yi Lu from China is having a monster event, and she actually may get a GM norm. So to get a Grandmaster norm, you would have to have a certain tournament performance here, and obviously you will be playing a ton of Grandmasters, so we will see how she does, but she has won several games, and here, this one was unbelievable. So in this game, she played a Rossolimo, Sicilian. Black went knight f6, and after e5, there are several moves here. The typical plan is to put the knight on c7 and target the bishop. Another plan is to put the knight on h5, which they've been doing. It's a bit edgy. There's knight c7. Now Black takes with the d-pawn, opening up the bishop and the queen, sets up the bishop over there, and both sides castle. It's a very fluid position, very dynamic, a lot of possibilities. Black obviously relying on certain pawn play over here, potential f6 stuff, blockading with the knight. But honestly, visually, I've always struggled with these positions for Black. I never know where any of my pieces are supposed to go. And White just sort of improves. And now, like this, transfers the knight to f4 because, I mean, the knight on c3 was not impressing anybody. Another possibility was to put the knight on the g5 square, but she does it like this. And now White just plays b3. Here, White, to me, is just comfortably better positionally. Because this bishop and this bishop really struggle. Bishops like open space, but you're not going to be able to play a move like f6 that literally loses on the spot to this. Bishop is hanging, and if rook f6, bishop b2, Black can resign. So it's just tough. It's not an easy position to play. I've really struggled playing some of these Rossolimos. And after takes, Black has the traditional advantage of the bishop pair, but it is not felt at all. It's really just not felt. I mean, the bishop on g7 is stuck, biting, rocks. Fun fact, I used to do that as a child. It explains a lot. This bishop is nothing more than like the frame of a car that you just have sitting with no wheels. It's just kind of like, that's cool. Maybe one day it'll get wheels and maybe an engine and a person to drive it. But right now it's just scraps. Queen c8, queen e2, and Miao Yi just makes a couple of improving moves. So does Divya. I mean, Divya's bringing the rooks to the d-file, but only one person here has future prospects. And what you need here to make any progress is a step back to take 2 steps forward, potentially. And Miao Yi plays f4, which is a really nice idea, securing the position. Black plays h5, and now knight f1. And what's going to happen here is similar to what Gukesh did. In the Gukesh game, he used his kingside pawns and queenside pawns, right, with g4. Well, Miao Yi is going to have to use some of these pawns. She plays queen f2, she plays knight e3, she plays queen h4, rook f1, and now she is ready with g4 and f5. So Divya has to move her f-pawn, en passant, of course, and now g4. And Miao Yi down to 6 minutes here. I think a little bit nervous, probably, because the position is opening up so much. She could have continued to be patient. She probably could have played like knight c4 and kept making improving moves, but she goes for g4, and now like backwards moves and just keeps trying to pressure and go forward. Divya here getting very creative, trying to create some counterplay and close the position up, but White is just permanently pressuring. Rook ae1, trying to remove the defenders, and at some point, it's just going to be too much. Bishop takes f6, the entire kingside pawn structure falling apart, knight f4, knight e6, and material is picked up, and now mate is incoming. King here, there is knight g6 winning the queen, and Miao Yi scores her 3rd win. She's beaten Divya, who's 2490. Divya on a rough tournament, kind of makes sense. Like, sometimes you lose and things spin out of control. But she also has a win versus Fredrik Svane and Kazibek and Nogierbek. Kazibek, she's also made a couple of draws. So, yeah, her performance rating, I think, is like either very close to 2600 or at it. And, well, she still has to play 5 games, but she could get a GM norm, which would be pretty monstrous. Now, Fabiano Caruana, kind of a sleeper tournament. He's sort of been on break even. In this game, he played against Vincent Keimer from Germany. Vincent, kind of a perennial top junior player. I don't even know if he's still junior, but he's born in 2003, so I guess 22. I mean, he's a dinosaur. In this game, we had a very traditional Queen's Gambit exchange variation. You know, nowadays, this used to be called inaccurate. Like, it used to be better for Black to play the move Bishop e7 here, but nowadays, absolutely nobody cares. I mean, Black is playing this traditional Queen's Gambit stuff. In this game, Fabiano choosing one of the most solid setups, knight bd7, knight f8, and knight e6. This has been played many times, knight to e6, and then this g6 move to control the light-squared bishop of White. But at this point, you know, the general plan is some sort of f3, bishop f2, and e4. This is the classical Queen's Gambit decline setup. The knight is not on the f3 square. This is kind of advanced, sophisticated stuff. And you're going to notice that actually that's sort of what happens. Ultimately, he comes to the decision to play the move f3. And then he comes back to e2. And I mean, yeah, generally in these sorts of positions, White just prepares the play in the center. Like this, ultimately, this position that you are seeing on your screen is a typical Queen's Gambit exchange variation for White. Your queen is here, bishop is on d3, knight is on e2, bishop is on f2, and you're trying to play for e4. And that's what happens. So Keimer gets the typical, right, the prototype. Queen's Gambit declined, and Fabiano's trying to do some stuff over there. Bishop g5, bishop e3. White's position optically looks very good, but after pawn takes, bishop g4 and rook, and okay, rook e1 or knight e2, both would have been okay. Fabi goes for f5. Now it's chaos. Black has no center pawns, right? So Black is trying to, I mean, Black's attacking on queen side, king side, with the bishops, with the queen. It would have been slightly better, I guess, for Vincent here to move his rook to e1. He probably didn't like something about the move, and he didn't want to destabilize his center. He kind of probably liked this move because his queen is activated, c-pawn is sort of stopped. The knight is out of the way of the queenside pawns. But, yeah, now Fabi activates all his pieces. Now the game is chaos. Now it's low time, right? So it's move 24. Both guys have to make a bunch of moves before they get to the critical 40th move. And here, a very nice dynamic decision from Fabi, who could have obviously, you know, played defense, but he plays offense. That's a sacrifice of a pawn. As far as I'm concerned, that is an offensive move, right? He's just straight up giving away a pawn and blocking, but he's saying, Vincent, I have the light squares now, and the position is a mess. Your bishop is hanging. You can't really move. You've got tremendous pressure here. Vincent plays bishop c1, which is a big mistake. He needed to go into Black's position, attacking the queen, attacking the bishop, and here the best, black has multiple moves, but if black, for example, takes the bishop, you lose your queen, you take a queen back, knight f7, bishop e2 is a counter-attacking fork, knight g5, and here, by the way, black doesn't even have to take a rook because they're both hanging, knight b2 is possible, but the position is equal. Position is actually equal, so Vincent kind of needed to be brave, but he backs up, probably thinking, I'm still, I've still got ideas like knight e6. And Fabi here had knight d6, which was the critical move, but he had to calculate all the complications, and he ends up going here, and Vincent restabilizes the position, but Fabi keeps attacking him with these bishops. Knight g3, and this is a nice move. A well-timed queen trade. Fabiano was not like, well, I can't trade the queen. No. It's a very nice decision, trading the queens into the better endgame, and now he has Vincent under significant pressure. Both guys are about to get really low on time as well. Vincent trying to figure out a way to coordinate his pieces, but it's not easy to do that against bishops, and the bishops are very mean. Rook e7, another well-timed trade offer, although this one, of course, would result in a check if you took it. So bishop d2, and in comes Fabi with those bishops. You may wonder, why didn't Vincent save his rook? Like rook f2, for example, rook c1. The bishops were absolute menaces in this game, and what ends up happening is we go to an endgame, and Fabiano just has a dominant position. And as long as he doesn't do anything too crazy, he will win the game, because he has a passed f-pawn, he has a rook for a knight, and it will take some time, but ultimately, he will remove one of white's pieces, and f3 is an absolutely lethal, beautiful final move. If you move the king, it's check and I queen. If you take the rook, 2 pawns beat the entire white position because you have to go here, and then I deflect you and promote one of the other pawns. Taking here does nothing because you queen. Really, really nasty finish, by the way, from Fabiano Caruana. And he basically won this game, as far as I'm concerned, when he played the move knight c4. This was a ridiculously deep positional pawn sacrifice. It led to him having the bishops in the long run. It was very, very instructive, and it was a nice win for him. And one man in this event who just cannot find his footing. I'm hearing that he also might be sick. I was reading that somewhere. It's terrible playing chess. First of all, in general, when you're not having a good tournament, but also being sick is just absolutely horrible. I just had one of the worst tournament performances of my life, and I lost, I think, 28, 29 rating points. Something's up with Arjun Erigaisi. In this game, Max Warmerdam, strong Dutch player, plays a sideline variation of the Sicilian defense, this sort of very offbeat, whatever the heck this is. Knight e4 is not possible because queen a4 check, because the pawn has moved, and that would be a fork on the king and the knight. But this is the setup chosen. This is actually not a completely idiotic Sicilian defense. This is kind of like the Jospum, Jose Martinez, the one who played against Vladimir Kramnik. He plays the Sicilian a lot. And basically the point of the Sicilian is to play like this, and then to try to play for like d4 and d5. It looks absurd, but it's not that bad. And Erigaisi here goes for g5. You'll notice Erigaisi is spending a lot of time in the opening. Oftentimes, when you are on tilt, and oftentimes when you're already not having a good tournament, you try new things. You kind of play unorthodox, you try to provoke, you try to cause fights, and you are a bit vulnerable because your calculation is not 100% accurate. I'm saying this from experience. d5 takes. And already, Warmerdam has sort of stabilized, but, you know, Erigaisi is still doing what got him to 2,800 in the first place. He is really trying to create a fight. And Warmerdam is game. I mean, he's doing his best. And we see e6, not the best. Queen d7 was slightly better to try to get out, you know, all of the pieces. e6 weakening the black position a little bit. And now b5, uber provocative stuff here from Erigaisi. Not developing his pieces. Both rooks have moved, so the king is going to stay in the center of the board. And opening himself up to potentially very vicious counterattacks. White just very calmly trading on the queen side and playing knight f1 and saying, I'm castled. I'm going to put my knight on g3. I now have control of probably all 3 sides of the board. Erigaisi is very good at creating a fight when he's sharp and trusting his own calculations. Now, watch what happens here. So Erigaisi transfers the knight to the middle. And at this point, the best move for black was queen f6. Giving up the pawn on h7. And knight h5, you have knight f3 check, pawn takes. There's queen e5 defending the rook. There's f4 taking the knight. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just black down a pawn. And yeah, probably not a position that Arjun wanted to go for. So now he has to play this defensive move. And then he gets his knight booted out of the center. And you'll notice that from the time spent, he's not happy about it. 15 minutes spent. His knight now has to go back. It just came from there, right? It just went to d7 and to e5. It just went back. And now Varmerdam's like, hello, that's a fork. So black has to go back again. And if I go back some 10 moves, look at the position. Nothing changed in the black position. He traded the A-pawns, but almost nothing changed. Only white has made improvements, and now white just keeps going forward. D5, but it's not enough. And Erigaisi's king is stuck in the center of the board. Counterplay is now roaring right back in his direction, and it doesn't take a genius here to figure out that at some point something's going to give, and you just cannot do this, and this is defended. Mate is protected. You are not getting mated. And now Max cleans up. He makes it impossible to make a move. E6, F6, both incoming, and bishop H6. I mean, everything in the black position falling apart. And now perhaps the best move of the entire game, King H1. And the point of King H1 is you want to play E6 and not be susceptible to a check. So King H1, black goes here. He restabilizes. And this was an absolutely flawless game. Bishop F4 hits all these pieces you cannot take because it's mate. Max Varmerdam beats his first 2,800 of his career. Arjun Erigaisi has now lost 4 games and has made 4 draws, and he has 2 out of 8, and he's down 30 rating points. It's crazy. He's down 30 points to 2771. Unfathomable. I mean, we've never seen this from Arjun, and it's, I gotta tell you, as somebody who just had a really, really rough tournament, it's kind of like inspiring. Like I am completely convinced Arjun Erigaisi will be back. It's just so different being a player who goes minus 30 and somebody watching somebody who is going minus 30. And I'm like, oh, he'll be back. Like, of course. So we'll see how Arjun finishes the tournament. A big win for Max. That is his first win against the 2,800 ever. Just barely, 2,801, but it counts, and I would be counting it. We'll see how he finishes the event as well. And here are your standings after 8 rounds. Gukesh, Nojibek, and Prague. Prague and Gukesh had an interesting game, but they ultimately drew it. It wasn't too captivating. We will see which one of them becomes the champ, but any of these players can catch each other. We have 5 rounds to go. And yeah, crazy. Just absolutely crazy to see Erigaisi there at the bottom. Mendonca is also an Indian player. He's quite strong. But he's a little lower rated than the field. He's like 26 something. And your challengers. Tai Dai. Van Wen, we will cover him as well. He's just having a killer event. I mean, he's beating all the players lower than him, and he's just very solid. So we will keep covering him. Erwin Lamy is a Dutch legend, monster. And Aydin Suleimanli is a young man from Azerbaijan. We will be covering his games down the stretch. We do have the IMs at the bottom there, but Miao Yilu is just a killer. I mean, she is just absolutely crushing. So that's the update from Tata Steel after 8 rounds. 5 more to go. GM norms to chase. Will Gukesh overtake Magnus as our next dominant champion? Will he demonstrate the consistency and maturity and so on? And I don't know, a lot of storylines, but I'll keep covering them for you. And like I said in the intro, you should check out the tour: Brussels, London, Vienna, Berlin, Munich, and Warsaw. Super exciting. And there are this many tickets left for Hamburg, which is February the 4th. Be there. We will have special guests. We will do live Gazdilo. And it'll be small and intimate. It's going to be, and I'll do meet and greets with everybody. I'll take pictures, and it'll be fun. Looking forward to seeing you all in a week. And tomorrow for more content. Get out of here.